let's start with some history. The very term psychosis, now technically psychotic disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, emanates or originated in the very ancient distinction between neurosis and psychosis, which preceded actually Freud by well over 100 years. The idea was that there are situations where people compensate for problems, traumas, lacks, and that would be neurosis. They can compensate in a variety of ways. Karen Horney identified at least 4, but all of them are neurotic ways. While in psychosis, instead of compensating for these problems, they decompensate, they disintegrate, they're overwhelmed. This is a very old distinction which doesn't have much currency today. A much better approach to all this would be to discuss inner objects or inner representations versus external objects and external representations. There are mental health conditions where people confuse inner objects with external objects. If a person confuses external objects with internal objects and really can't tell the difference at all and even externalizes internal objects and experiences them as totally external, then we can use the old label psychosis. If a person confuses internal objects with external objects, but still maintains some recognition of the internal content of the external objects or the external content of the internal objects, we can talk about borderline, like Kernberg did in 1975, when he said that, when he coined the word borderline, he said it's borderline between neurosis and psychosis. So borderlines often confuse internal with external, but they are still capable of saying, well, it's internal, but it was caused by something external. Or they're still capable of saying, well, it's external, but it is colored by my fears, my abandonment anxiety, so they are still able to maintain this reality test to some extent, not fully. And of course you have narcissists, where everything is an internal object. Nothing is an external object. And you have psychopaths, where everything is an external object, and nothing is an internal object. Psychopaths are devoid of internal objects, completely. And this was called by Franz Brentano and other psychologists, intentionality. Psychopaths are intentionalists. In other words, all their mental processes are directed at something. So they are goal-oriented. They want money, they want sex, they want power. But there's nothing inside there. It's all the objects that have any meaning to them, and all the objects that help them to regulate ego functions, and all the objects that constitute the reality test, their reality, and all the objects that help them to regulate their emotions, because psychopaths do have emotions, negative emotions. But all the objects that help them to regulate emotions, they are all external. So if a psychopath wants to regulate his rage, he will kill you. He will not, for example, cut himself. So everything is externalized.
Everything is externalized. So if I'm full of rage and I want to deal with the rage,
I would regulate the rage by consuming an external object.
Right. Yeah.
Everything is outside him.
Yeah.
Money is outside him. Sex is outside him. Power is outside. Other people, nuisances. Everything is outside him. And narcissist, everything is an internal object. Narcissist does not recognize your separate existence. The first thing he does, if he thinks you are a possible source of supply, for example, he would convert you into an internal object, and he would continue the interaction with the internal object, not with you. Yeah. So a narcissist, for example, would be shocked that you have an autonomous existence. Let's take an example. I'm a narcissist, and you are an internalized object, and we're dealing with psychology. And then I would say goodbye, and 10 years from now, I'll come back to you and say, Richard, let's make a documentary about narcissism. Tell me, excuse me, mate, but I moved on to Bitcoin. I'm an expert on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'll be enraged.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, how come you moved on to Bitcoin? I mean, narcissists interact only with internal representations of external objects, never ever with the external object. Object permanence, which later came to be called object constancy, or more precisely, object inconstancy. There's no constancy. The solutions are different. Because the narcissist has only internal objects, He uses his internal object to regulate his abandonment anxiety. What he does, he mummifies you. He freezes you. He merges with you. He fuses with you. He digests you. He converts you to his extension, thereby fixating you, like embalming you, fixating you, and his abandonment anxiety is abated. Borderline, on the other hand, would, because the borderline can tell that you are an external object. The narcissist solution is shoot you in the head, and then take your body, embalm it, and then eat it.
Now you're here forevermore.
Yes, narcissism is a form of cannibalism, mental cannibalism. The borderline solution is to say to you, listen, let's become one. Let's from now on be one organism. So it's a shared psychosis. What happens is the distinction between internal object and external object is so corrupted that this patient experiences the internal object as coming from the outside. So you have auditory hallucinations, which are essentially inner voices, introjects. Inner voices, but they are projected outside. They are perceived, experienced, have emotional reactions, everything, as though they are external. Also, there is visual hallucinations where these people can project. So these are the gradations. I think it's much more useful to talk about all disorders in terms of objects, internal and external.
Could you just explain to people who don't understand the difference between an internal and an external object, what that means in practical terms?
Every human being creates representations of other human beings. That is part of object relations theory. One of the first things we do, we create representations. So Kohut called it imago, the various names. So we all create representations of other people. The reason we create these representations is to maintain continuity. Even when we don't see these people, we are able to maintain some kind of hidden, surreptitious, subterranean dialogue with these people, so that when we meet them next time, we can kind of smoothly, seamlessly continue the interaction. So the person that is the cause or elicits the internal object is an external person. Everyone creates internal objects, internal representations of other people. The difference between healthy people and sick people is that healthy people always maintain strict boundary separation between the internal object and external object. They never make a mistake. They never confuse any aspect of the internal object with the external object, while sick people, problematic people, or whatever you want to call it, disordered people, they have problems with identifying objects as either external or internal. They have problems. The psychotic cannot tell the difference at all. The narcissist has no external objects. The borderline can tell the difference, but somehow wants to partly convert external objects to internal objects by merging, fusion. It's a form of extreme codependence. And the psychopath has only external objects. So these are pathologies of representation, pathologies of what in object relations, pathologies of object relations, in effect. That's how I see it.
Have you ever spoken to a client who you would have said was maybe somewhere on the spectrum for borderline or possibly even an inverted narcissist, and then thought at a certain point this person might actually be schizophrenic?
Schizophrenia, or more precisely paranoia schizophrenia, it's a highly specific diagnosis within the spectrum of psychotic disorders. It's extremely specific. It must contain elements of paranoia. It must contain severe social dysfunctioning, etc. So it is so narrow that I think it would not be useful to use the word schizophrenic or schizophrenia, but more generally to talk about psychotic disorder.
Psychotic disorder. And within psychotic disorder is hallucination common?
So, depending on the type of psychotic disorders, hallucinations are pretty common. What is hallucination? Hallucination is when you confuse internal object with external object. Simple. It all comes down to disturbed, perturbed object relations. The child has a primary caregiver, like mother. And the child has a relationship with the mother that is boundaryless. The child doesn't say, this is me, this is mother. There's a single unit, me, mother, mother, me. Then gradually, the child begins to realize that mother is not me and I'm not mother, because sometimes she's not in the room. So the child begins to create the boundary. When the mother is not in the room, not responding when he's crying. So the child begins to realize, wait a minute, mother is not me, and I'm not mother always. I mean, something's going on here. There must be me. So the self is created. And then the first object relation is between the self and mother. That's why we call mother primary object. But later, as the child matures, he begins to direct energy towards other people who are not mother. And these are called objects. This is a seamless process where the same energy that used to be cathexed, used to be invested totally in mother, can now be dispersed or diffusely distributed among all other people in life. And it is here that there's a breakdown in disordered people.
Right.
They can't make this transition. Okay. They got stuck somewhere. The psychotic got stuck in the stage of me, mother, mother, me.
Right.
He never made, he never created a self. For him, everything is one. Mother is me, I am mother, the world is me, mother is the world is mother. I mean, it's all one big blob.
Yeah.
And so he finds it, he has no orientation, the psychotic. He doesn't know, is this real? Or is this me projecting it? Or he can't tell. Because he got stuck at the phase of differentiation, we call it. He got stuck at the phase of differentiation, separation, individuation from mother. That's a psychotic. The narcissist got stuck at the stage of beginning to accept other objects. So he did make the distinction between mother and himself, but then he got stuck. He never transitioned to redirecting this energy at all other objects. So he does to all other objects what he used to do to mother. He used to be fused with mother, merged with mother. That's the only technique he knows.
Yeah.
He did not develop any other technique. So when he sees other people, he fuses with them, merges with them, as he was with mother.
Do you think that process justifies saying that narcissists are intrinsically codependent?
Yes.
Because they need to be?
Yes, but codependents, as opposed to narcissists, are more advanced. I was about to say that the next stage is borderline.
Right.
Actually, I'm completely opposed to the school of thought that borderline is more primitive than narcissism.
Okay.
Completely opposed. I think narcissism is by far more infantile than borderline because it has pronounced splitting, it has pronounced merger fusion with inability to tell the difference between inner. I think narcissism is much closer to psychosis than borderline.
Okay.
So I think the next phase is the borderline, where you can recognize others. I mean, you have transitioned, you're separated from mother, you recognize others, and you can cathect in them. You can invest emotionally in them, realizing that they are separate from you.
Yeah.
You are already separated, individuated, but the only way you could somehow interact with them is by becoming one with them. And that's where codependence comes in. Borderline shares a huge number of characteristics with post-traumatic conditions. And the last phase is the psychopath. Actually, the psychopath is the culmination, epitome, reification, and apotheosis of all this cluster B3. Because the borderline recognizes other people as external, but has only the technique of becoming one with mother.
Yeah.
So what the borderline tries to do, it tries to become one while still accepting you as external.
And is this where you'll see more guilt from, typically you'd see more guilt from borderlines than from narcissists, because they're, look, I know you're external, I know you have your own, but I need you to be fused with me.
Yes, so the narcissist actually is egosyntonic, because the narcissist says, on the first meeting, the narcissist says, oh, you're external, I like you. It slurps you, I mean, digests you, that's it. I mean, you're no longer external. So there's not a lot of guilt there. There's no ego dystony. The borderline has severe ego dystony, because the borderline says, well, I know you're external. I know you'll always be external. I know you'll always be external. I know, therefore, that I can lose you. And please, I'm so dependent on you. I will die without you, so please merge with me. Please, let us become one. So this is the codependent borderline solution. And the psychopath solution is by far, in my view, the most interesting. The psychopath says, listen, I know you're external, and I don't have any problems of object constancy, because before you know it, and before you get up out of the chair, I'm going to take from you anything I need. And after that, I will discard you as an empty shell. So psychopath recognizes you as utterly external. It doesn't need, therefore, he has no need to create an inner representation of any kind. It's utterly goal-oriented. In other words, what the psychopath does, he objectifies you and reduces you to whatever the goal is. When you talk to psychopaths, they talk about other people, not as people. They would say, oh, this money bag, or, oh, she's hot.
The serial killers would talk about that.
Serial killers would do that. And by the way, doctors, medical doctors. Medical doctors would talk about patients, they would say, this kidney, or this heart. So and indeed, we had numerous studies that showed that psychopathy is very high among surgeons.
And probably a useful trait, isn't it?
It's a useful trait, because you have to cut people open. And so on. It's a pleasure. So it's very common among surgeons. So we have professions where it's critical to reduce external objects to the element that is the functional element. So if I want money from you, you're a money bag.
Right.
And if I'm going to cut you open, you're the heart. If I want power from you, then you're a string puller. I would minimize you. I would abstractize you. I would make you lean and mean. I would make you. I would streamline you, so that once I obtain my goal, you're no longer needed. I will discard you as an empty shell, and therefore there's no mental need to create any representation.
Yeah,
that's a psychopath.
Okay,
that's how I see it.
So, in terms of response to trauma, the CPTSD, based on what you've said, could we say that there is a potential for people with pronounced CPTSD to actually develop not schizophrenia, but these psychotic disorders where they are experiencing hallucinations because the boundary between internal and external is so weak?
Well, let us see what is trauma. Trauma is a situation where an external object usually, but not always. You can have internal objects creating trauma. For example, if you have a very powerful sadistic introject, if you have a voice inside you, the inner critic, that is a sadistic superego and constantly criticizes you, berates you, and seeks your destruction, that could create trauma.
Yeah.
And the response to that inner voice would be traumatic. So, but much more commonly, trauma is a reaction to an external object. And now, this external object is hurtful, frustrating, hateful, and clearly seeks your demise or your destruction. So these elements, the malice must exist for trauma to happen.
Yeah.
If malice is absent, if the abuse is offended or indifferent, or usually there's no trauma. But when the malice is coupled with evil intent, malicious intent, and usually trauma results. Why? I mean, how is this connected to the object theory that we discussed? Because what are your options when an external object threatens your existence? Let's review the options. Your first option is to pretend that the external object does not exist. It's fantasy. Yeah. Fantasy defense. Fantasy is a defense mechanism. I don't know how many people know that. It's a psychological defense mechanism. So first defense is fantasy. You say, okay, this external object doesn't really exist. What is this? Psychosis. When we say this object doesn't exist, I am supplanting it, substituting for it with an internal object which is more benign. That would be psychosis, in effect. The second option you have is to say, I'm gonna cannibalize this external object. I'm gonna be much more powerful than this external object. I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to conquer. I'm going to destroy. That's a narcissistic solution. Creating a God-like entity that is omnipotent, omniscient, and perfect, and that can overcome any threatening external object, any hurtful external object, and the malice of the external object. Of course, there is a price to pay. You must sacrifice yourself to this God, like the Moloch. And you sacrifice the true self to this God. So the bargain struck between this God and you is the following. I will protect you on condition that you cease to exist. That's the only minor condition. Protect you on condition that you cease to exist.
Yeah.
But I will protect you.
Yeah. Just feed me your inner child.
Give me yourself.
Yeah.
Give me your true self.
Yeah.
I will protect you. I'll become you. I'll protect you. I'll consume you. Now you also can see the intricate connections. Because the child that is becoming a narcissist, what's happening to the child? This child disappears as an external object. He disappears and reappears as a construct. So the child, when the child has a true self, the child perceives himself as an external object. There's a true self there. But if I, as a child, sacrifice the true self, I am also at the same time abolishing myself as an external entity and becoming 100% internal entity, the false self, the construct. From that moment on, I will do the same to all people. Because I did it to myself.
Yeah.
That's my coping strategy.
Yeah.
From now on, anyone I meet, I will convert from external object to internal object. That's it.
And feed them to Moloch.
And feed them to the Moloch as sources of supply. So this is the narcissistic response to trauma. Again, we are dealing with objects. The borderline response, the borderline response to trauma, to the threatening external object. Remember that we said that, I said, that trauma is a response to a threatening, hurtful, and hateful, malicious external object. So the borderline's response is, I can kind of neutralize the threatening aspects, the malicious, the minacious aspects. I can neutralize it by combining, with it. First of all, if I combine with this entity, whatever it does, I do. We are the same. Even if it threatens, it's actually I'm threatening. Who am I threatening, by the way? I'm threatening myself. So that's why we have in borderline a lot of lability. Once the merger with the threatening object had been achieved, it internalized a dissonance. Because the external object is threatening the borderline. The borderline solution is to become one with the threatening object, but from that moment on, the borderline herself is threatening herself. She is becoming the threatening object. So this internalizes a dissonance. And this dissonance is the core, the foundation of the lability. Because the emotional dysregulation reflects the fact that it's a combination of extremely threatening bad object and extremely childlike good object. So this is the borderline solution. I will become one with my enemy. That way I will neutralize. Now, there's an interesting comparison here. That's precisely what the immune system does. When bacteria and viruses, that's the correct form. When bacteria and viruses invade the body, the first lines of defense are composed of T cells and so on. And there's something called bacteriophage. And the bacteriophage engulfs the bacteria. It sort of creates an envelope around the bacteria, which doesn't allow the bacteria or the virus to express. Doesn't allow the bacteria or virus to get in touch with the body. And so you have this trillion bacteriophages engulfing they don't do anything. They just engulf. Create a borderline is an immune reaction. It's an immunological reaction. It's like, I'm going to create an envelope around the threat so that the threat never gets in touch with me, but with the envelope. But there's a price to pay because the envelope is you. And so there's a constant, what's going on here? I feel threatened from inside. But it's me. I mean, I'm threatening me. Why am I threatening me? So this creates, of course, gradually a dependence. Because you become dependent on this external source of threat. To neutralize this, actually, this is what we call trauma bonding. The borderline forms trauma bonding with the external source of her trauma. By internalizing this source and merging with this source, the borderline has trauma bonded with herself. She created Stockholm Syndrome with herself. She is her own hostage. That's a very complex concept. Let me, with your permission.
Absolutely. I was just, the reason I made that face is just recently somebody had asked me about this issue of hallucination. I know this person, they have CPTSD, And I made a video where I posited a number of different ideas, and one of them was that in order to continue functioning as a personality, people with CPTSD are addicted to a drama cycle. So we actively are searching out negative relationships so that we know who we are. Because without a traumatic relationship, we don't know who we are,
Yes.
which is exactly what you just said.
Yeah, the drama cycle, I mean, part of the lability and the choice of mates, partner choice, and so on and so forth, are intended to perpetuate the cycle. I think so too. But just for the viewer's sake, to repeat this, because it's a bit of a crazy concept. It's how is this going? There's an external source. Imagine a very sadistic mother. As you're worthless, you're a slut, you are this, you're that. You internalize this voice as a child. The child becomes internalized as what used to be called superego, then inner critic, then I don't know what. So the voice is internalized, and technically it's called introject. The voice is internalized, and mother keeps talking to you long after she had died. Keeps telling you, you're a bad object, you're worthless, you're a slut, you will never amount to anything, you will always fail, you're ugly, you're stupid, and so on. The voice keeps talking. The borderline solution is to merge with this external threat. Of course, mother is dead, so you're right. If she cannot merge with mother, she will find another abuser to merge with, and then another abuser to merge with. And that would explain why most borderlines end up with narcissists and psychopaths and abusers. Because they are looking for a substitute for the original external threat, for the original malicious person who sought to destroy them. Okay. So now the borderline comes to this external source. Originally, mother probably, maybe someone else, comes to the source and says, listen, let's become one. Let's become one. Why do we have to fight? I mean, let's become one. But what does it mean, this offer, let's become one? First of all, I acknowledge and accept what you're saying. It's not possible to become one with mother if you tell mother you're wrong. I'm a good object. I'm a worthy object. You come to mother and you say, listen, mom, I agree with you.
I'm a bad object.
I'm a bad object. I'm worthless. I'm a slut. I'm a this. I'm a that. And that's what's called in the literature the emptiness of the borderline, the inner void, the inner emptiness of the borderline. Because the borderline adopts actively the point of view of the source of external threat. She adopts this dissonant view. So this is the first peace offering. I accept what you're saying. I'm worthless. I'm hopeless. I'm everything. But can we make peace? Do we have to fight? Now that I agree with you, let's be one. You will provide me with motherly love, warmth, safety. You provide me with safety. You provide me with your presence, with your constant presence, with object constancy. And in return, I will accept what you're saying about me. I'll accept your verdict about me. Okay. But what does it mean? It means, and by the way, this is not a realistic process. It's not the borderline comes to mother and the borderline internalizes, she strikes this deal not with the mother, but with the introject of mother. The deal is struck internally, not externally.
And unconsciously as well.
Yes, and unconsciously. The borderline strikes a deal with a construct inside her, which is the introject, not with real mother. Real mother could be dead. I mean, she strikes this. But what happens then? Suddenly you have inside a construct which keeps telling you, you're bad, you're worthless, this creates something called dissonance. Because no one wants to feel bad, worthless. So this creates dissonance. When we have a situation where we are emotionally attached, when we have cathexis, when we have emotionally attached to an abuser, and this attachment has compulsive features, obsessive features, and so on, so on. We call it trauma bonding. The borderline is trauma bonded with her internal object, not with outside people. This is why it's close to impossible to break this. The mistake in all the psychological texts that I'm reading, I mean, almost all, is to say, well, the borderline creates trauma bonding with her abuser, with her abusive spouse, with her abusive. That's not true. Because had this been true, it would have been relatively easy to
fix it,
You can't fix it because the source of the trauma bonding is not external at all. She bonds internally with the inner critic, with the critical voice, with the introject. What she then does, she simply substitutes one abuser after another because she has this distinction between external and internal objects, the borderline. She always needs external objects as stand-ins, as subs, like in the movie. So she has the inner conflict here, inside. She has trauma bonding inside. She is held hostage by the introject inside. She has Stockholm syndrome inside, but because she does maintain a reality test, she realizes internal, external, in order not to think that she's crazy, she constantly seeks external objects that affirm the malicious part of the dyad that is internal.
If she was then, the hopeful element of that, I guess, would be if you could find a way to heal the trauma bond with the superego inside of a borderline, you'd have a means of borderline recovery.
Yes, absolutely.
I have no idea how you do it.
Well, actually, DBT is not bad in that.
Right.
I don't think they understand what frankly, I don't think they understand what they're doing. But they intuitively stumbled upon so dialectical behavioral therapy has elements of this. It's important to understand that if we adopt this view, because what I'm proposing now is an extension of object relations theory, which has not been proposed until now. It's an extension of object relation to account for a diverse set of mental health issues, just by using a single assumption, inner and outer and external object, confusion between inner and external, subsuming the external in the internal, subsuming the internal in the external, or merging but realizing the difference, like borderline. So if you use the single principle, and it's, in science we say that the fewer the assumptions in a theory, the more likely you're right. So here's a single assumption theory that accounts for everything. And you're right. If we heal the dysfunctional relationship between the internal objects of the borderline, this dissonance and so on, then we would heal the borderline. Now, if you look at the panoply of mental health manifestations of the borderline, all of it is easily accountable by an ongoing process of trauma bonding with an internal object. For example, lability, which is a critical feature of borderline. Lability is totally explained by this. I mean, let's think for a minute. Why on earth are borderlines labile? I mean, she has a partner may be abusive, maybe not. There is, let's assume, a good relationship. Still she's labile.
Yes,
it's clear that lability is internal, not external.
We couldn't have peace in the home. Peace in the home actually made her worse.
Yes.
It was irritating for her
right.
to be peace.
Why? Using this theory. Because peace in the home does not allow her to reconcile the challenges. Challenges her solution.
Right. So she had to provoke some.
She must have a stand-in for the malicious part of the dyad that she created. She must have someone play the part. It's like we're having a two-man show. So I'm telling you, listen, your part is the bad cop, I'm the good cop. Now imagine that we're beginning to act, and suddenly you become very nice and soft and cushy, and I mean, I'll stop the recording. What the fuck are you doing?
What are you doing? You're ruining this.
You're ruining this. So that's what the borderline is doing. I mean, if you are really good to her, if you love her, if you coddle her, if you help her, I mean, this is utterly counterproductive. You are destabilizing her inner world. You are challenging the solution that she finally found to maintain homeostasis and equilibrium.
I could feel as well that she liked it. She liked positive gestures and kindness and love, but there'd always be the rumbling of horses over the mountains. You knew something would be coming within an hour or two, almost as if the love had provoked.
Yes,
and
that's
response.
not you and me. This is Freud, and he called it approach, avoidance, repetition, compulsion.
Okay.
Approach, avoidance, repetition, compulsion. So this was discovered like 100 years ago.
Right.
And right, yes. But this is because, of course, everyone likes to be loved. I mean, even narcissists like to be loved. It's utter nonsense to say that. I mean, there's no person alive who doesn't want to be loved. Question is, how do we react to love?
Yes.
The psychopath reacts to love as an opportunity. Oh, she loves me.
Get her.
Get her. Let's fuck her. Let's take her money. Let's. Because for narcissists, there's no inner. To really love someone, you must have both external and internal objects to bind with.
Yes.
Actually, love is a bridge between external and internal object. That's a very good definition of love.
Yeah.
It's a mental, psychodynamic bridge between external and internal object. Psychopaths have no internal object, only external. So of course there's no bridge. And so psychopaths, when he's loved, he says, wow, great opportunity. The narcissist, when he's loved, he actually translates it to narcissistic supply. Because he has no external object, only internal objects, he would try to modify the internal object in view of the love. He would say, okay, that's great supply. I mean, I can keep the internal object.
Yeah.
Great supply.
Yeah.
So he would continue to idealize the internal object. But his interaction would be with the internal object. When the narcissist is loved, he doesn't interact at all with the external object. He goes inside, he takes the internal object, and he infuses it with emotional energy.
Yeah.
He idealizes it, or more technically, he catexes it. So he infuses it with emotional energy, and he continues to idealize it, as long as he is loved by that object. But the whole interaction is with internal object.
Yes.
Nothing external.
Yeah.
The psychotic, when he is loved, would perceive the love either as coming from outside or as coming from inside, and very often simultaneously both. For the psychotic, strong emotions of any kind are extremely disorienting.
Yeah.
Extremely disorienting. Psychotics react with extreme mental illness to strong emotions. So, for example, it's very common for psychotic who is being loved or faced with an expression of love. So a psychotic enters the room and a woman tells him, a significant woman in his life, tells him, you know, I love you. This psychotic can go into catatonia. He can utterly freeze and not react anymore.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know how to classify. He doesn't know whether this voice came from inside him, from outside him. It's a whole different issue, because if it came from inside, it's very threatening.
Yeah.
If it came from outside, it's a different story. But anyhow, it threatens the psychotic. The borderline, if she is told she is loved, she wants to be loved. Borderlines are hyper-emotional in many cases, or at least they appear to be hyper-emotional. What happens is simply they have highs and lows. They are dysregulated. But emotional, definitely, they have emotions. They have a modicum of empathy. I mean, they are... So, with the borderline, the initial reaction is warmth and fuzziness. And wonderful. I mean, I'd like to be loved. I mean, that. That's the child reacting. But then the child wakes up and says, oh, fuck. Fuck, I'm betraying mother. I mean, because being loved means that I'm a positive object. Means that I'm worth it. Means that I have aspects of me which are amenable to love. It means that I'm lovable.
This is the ultimate taboo.
Yeah, it's taboo. I'm betraying mother.
Yeah.
I'm bloody betraying mother. And mother is now the condition for my equilibrium and homeostasis, because she's not only internalized, she's me. We are one organism, you know. And so there's a withdrawal and like a feeling of threat and aggression.
Yeah.
Immediately aggression.
Rebalance the system
To
internally.
reintroduce the abuser, so projective identification, she forces the partner to behave as an abuser, to abuse her. And so she can then reintroduce the abuser, which affirms her comfort zone or her inner structure, that yes, I'm a worthless object, I'm a this, I'm a that. And the cycle starts again.
And then she go back to feeling calm. In that moment of, oh, I'm a worthless piece of shit. Oh, thank God, this is wonderful. Whereas the love phase was pleasant feeling, but actually anxiety-inducing.
Anxiety-inducing, absolutely.
When you're talking about feelings of love in the individual, creating, being very dysregulating and possibly inducing a psychotic effect, is that what we see in stalkers? I love you, I'm your fan, so I'm going to obsess over you because of the feelings I have for you.
Yes, not a highly specific type of stalker. That's the erotomaniac stalker.
Okay.
The erotomaniac stalker is the kind of stalker that, and again, we can use the same very simple principle. Erotomaniac stalker is a kind of stalker that confuses internal and external objects. So if he loves, you love.
Right.
It's
So if I love you, you must love me because I
what
love
do you
you.
mean? We are you don't. There's no external object.
Okay.
So erotomaniac stalker. That's why I wrote extensively about erotomania, because erotomaniac stalking is a form of narcissism, effectively a form of narcissism, because erotomaniac stalker has no external object, none. All the interactions of the erotomaniac stalker are with internal objects.
Okay.
So if I fall in love with Jodie Foster, I would internalize Jodie Foster. And all my interactions after that will be with the internalized Jodie Foster. She would fall in love with me. We would consider honeymoon. We would consider getting married. I would write letters to her. And then one day I would enter her apartment because
It's your apartment.
it's my apartment. I mean, we're about to get married, have a honeymoon. And Jodie will come out of the kitchen, say, what the fuck, and take a knife and try to kill me. And this would create the most absolutely mind-blowing dissonance. Because
And then when you're interviewed by the police, you will tell them, no, she knows me, we're getting married.
she knows it, or she doesn't know herself
Okay.
as well. I mean,
As
I know
I
her
do.
much better than she knows
Okay,
herself.
okay.
She loves me, but she doesn't know it
Yeah.
yet.
Right.
And so, but this is also the thing, because what is it saying? It's saying, Jodie is inside me. But who is this thing? If you want to know Jodie Foster, talk to me.
Yeah.
I know Jodie Foster much better than Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
If you want to know anything about Jodie, I know, for example, that she loves me. Because I know her intimately.
Okay.
So here we come to the issue of intimacy. The issue of intimacy is a serious conundrum. People, including professionals, very often conflate, confound, confuse intimacy and everything else I mentioned, like you mentioned, like trauma bonding. And, I mean, they confuse this with this. Erotomaniac stalker, of course, has instant intimacy with his internal object because it's internal. Ironically, narcissists have total intimacy, but with their internal objects. This is why, in the very primitive stages that narcissism was defined, people made the mistake, people including Freud, made the mistake of saying it's an extreme form of self-love. Well, in a way, it's true, because the narcissist is extremely intimate with himself. He is the ultimate intimacy with himself, but with himself, with internalized objects. So narcissists can fall in love with a woman. No, I mean, narcissists don't fall in love. But narcissists can identify a woman as a source of supply, which he wrongly mislabels as falling in love.
Yeah.
So he will identify her as supply, he will be falling in love. He will internalize her immediately because of abandonment anxiety, object inconsistency. He will internalize her. He will then continue to interact with the internal construct, never with the external object. But these are real interactions. They're exactly like a love affair. They're exactly like, that's why the mistake of at the beginning when people said narcissist is an extreme form of self-love. True. The narcissist is having a love affair, but not with his self, with the representations, inner representations of external objects.
So he is having intimacy
Yes.
with another, but within his own ego boundaries, they've sort of been...
No one is capable of intimacy like narcissists. No one. I'm telling you. Not healthy people, not borderlines, and forget all this. The most extreme form of intimacy is a narcissist, but with inner representations of external objects. With these representations, he has a love affair. He is helpful. He's compassionate. He's considerate. He's accepting. He's warm. He's loving. He's coddling himself. You name it. And again, when people observed it from outside, they said, narcissists are so much in love with themselves. It's disgusting. Yeah. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
It's not with actually, narcissists loathe themselves. They are compensatory. But they love inner representations of external objects. So the most extreme form of intimacy is with a narcissist, which raises the question, what the hell is intimacy? Because we thought, intuitively, all of us think intuitively, that intimacy can only happen between two objects, external object. I mean, the other one is an external object to me, and I'm an external object to the other. And of course, that's not true. Intimacy, actually, in the majority of cases, happens internally, not externally. And so,
Even, you're saying even in neurotypical
even in
people.
healthy, totally healthy relationship, I think intimacy happens most of the time, internally, not externally. But to understand that more deeply, we need to define intimacy. I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, we have time. I was actually going to ask you a question before which relates to this. You said about marriage. You didn't say about marriage. I said about marriage. I'm confusing me and you, Jesus. It's happening. The ego boundaries have gone.
Are you borderline?
Borderline. So, the love being a bridge between the inner and external object. When marriage and long-term relationships work, is that because the bridge between the internal and the external object is strong, was what I was going to ask you, which relates to this issue of internal intimacy versus external intimacy.
In marriage, in long-term marriages, long-term relationships, there's a very interesting process where initially when there's love, love has several phases. There's limerence, which is infatuation plus sexual lust. So there's limerence, and following limerence, we settle into a second.
Are you saying limerence?
Limerence.
L-I-M-M?
Limerence.
Oh, right.
It's the first phase of in psychological literature, not in. So in psychological literature, we distinguish three phases. There's limerence, second phase, third phase. So in the phase of limerence, hormones talk, essentially, hormones, pheromones. It's very animalistic. In the second phase, we construct the bridge. And in the third phase is fascinating because what happens in the third phase, we begin to confuse external, internal, and bridge. We begin to, in effect, become a bit, if you want, disordered. We're beginning to lose reality test regarding the externality of the object, internality of our object, and whether the bridge is half our side, half their side, or totally me, or total. So the confusion, the locus of confusion is about the bridge.
Right.
We are no longer sure whether the bridge is internal, whether the bridge is external, and consequently, because if the bridge is internal, it leads to an internal object. If the bridge is external, it leads to an external object. And if I'm confused about the bridge, I would be confused about the status of the other object, whether it's internal or external. That's precisely why modern literature about love considers it a mental health pathology.
Right.
It is. Psychodynamically, love is a mental health pathology.
Okay.
With serious confusion
Yeah.
about externality and internality of objects and other issues. I would even say that had there been a more open-minded DSM committee, they might have considered love as a cluster B disorder.
Really?
Really, because think about it. What are cluster B disorders? They are known as a dramatic cluster. Drama is an excellent definition for love.
Yeah.
I mean, it starts with drama, in effect.
Yeah.
Starts with drama, continues with narcissism, and ends up with essentially borderline psychosis. Very mild forms, very attenuated. These are attenuated forms.
Is there anything we can do to avoid those pitfalls? I mean,
These are not pitfalls. Absolutely not pitfalls. They are the foundations of attachment and bonding.
It's the foundations of a good marriage.
Yes.
It's the psychotic delusion.
It's not so. Listen, these are labels.
Yeah.
These are very attenuated. It's like a homeopathy.
Right.
Homeopathy.
Yeah.
It's like one part in a million.
One part in a million, yeah.
It's these are attenuated forms.
Okay.
But if we look only at what we call phenomenology, if we look at just at the structure, then clearly love is a psychopathology, which has very strong elements, depending on the phase, of object-relation problem, confusions, which therefore can be identified as narcissism, borderline, psychosis, etc. So judging only structurally, which one should never do, should also take into account intensity, emotional effect. For example, love does not create emotional dysregulation in the second and third phases.
Okay.
So, tongue-in-cheek, you could say that love is a cluster B disorder.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Understand?
Yeah.
Because it has these mild...
There's elements to it, the drama.
Souvenirs.
And,
Souvenirs from... But the confusion is interesting.
Yeah.
In the context of what we're talking. The confusion in love is interesting because it's not about that object or this object. It's about the bridge. Because you don't know if the bridge is part of you you cannot be sure about the position of the outside object. Now you see it very clearly, of course, in breakups.
Yes.
When you break up in a very deep relationship with emotional investment, not just any breakup of a hookup, but a breakup of a serious
real
deep relationship,
yeah.
it is the bridge that confuses you.
Yes.
It's not the external one.
No.
She went away.
Yeah.
It's the bridge that confuses you. You're beginning to ask yourself, was it all in my mind? You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to ask, did she really love me? Even later, you begin to ask, did I really love her? I mean, so the confusion is not about the objects, but about the bridge.
Yes.
Love,
Yeah.
the bridge.
Yeah.
But from the outside, this is indistinguishable from borderline and psychosis, because there's a confusion about the objects. The reason for the confusion is different. The locus is different, but
Yeah.
the result is the same.
It's interesting because I've done a course that's called Breaking the Trauma Bond, and the first phase is all about making a distinction, drawing a boundary between the person and the relationship, which another word for saying
Yes.
is the bridge,
Yes,
where you
absolutely.
walk away and you go, oh, I thought we were 50-50 on the bridge, but I think actually it was 80%
Yeah,
in me and 20%.
exactly, yeah.
Let's stop talking about that person. Let's never mention the word Sally ever again. Let's talk about the bridge,
Yes.
because it was a phenomena, not a thing.
True.
It was an occurrence.
Very true.
And that seems to really help.
Love is not you and someone else. Love is the interaction.
Yeah.
Love is the chemical reaction. So in chemistry, for example, we have something called epiphenomenal solutions. It's when you take 2 or 3 substances and they create something totally new. A best example is, of course, hydrogen and oxygen. If you take hydrogen and oxygen, put them together, you get water. Water has nothing to do with oxygen, nothing to do with hydrogen, but you get water.
Yeah.
It's the same with love.
Yeah.
You take you and you take your lover and you put together, there is a third entity.
Totally third entity.
It's nothing to do with you, with her. Now, when you ask the question, was this 80% me or 20? Stop to think for a second. If it was 80% you, you misperceived the other object.
Yes.
It was all actually, you were interacting with an internal object,
Yes.
not with an external object.
Yes.
And this is why I say that if you look phenomenologically from the outside, you can make the case that love is a form of cluster B disorder which borders on psychosis.
It's
You can make.
folie à deux, isn't it? It's a group
It's kind of shared
psychosis.
psychosis,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Is there a chance?
By the way, we use shared psychosis all the time. It's my coinage, actually. The correct form is shared psychotic disorder.
Shared psychosis.
I don't want to mislead the viewers, and then they will hate me, because now they all love me.
You don't want to ruin.
I don't want to ruin the
Built
bridge.
with the bridges we
bridge over troubled water. I mean,
Is there a chance, do you think, for long-term relationships, for marriage? And if there is one, how do we keep it sane? How do we keep it strong? Or a realistic view of the bridge, let's say.
so this is more a social, cultural question. First, I really want to thank you for asking me all these questions, because I've watched most of your videos, which would explain my mental condition. And I know that you tackle many of these issues pretty deeply, and so on. I doubt that I have a lot to add to it. So thank you for the trust. I think this is actually a social cultural question
Okay.
and should be answered in these terms. The more ubiquitous and all-pervasive narcissism is, the more hopeless marriage and
Yeah.
And now we are entering a second phase, when narcissism is considered to be quaint and mild. And we are having a wave of psychopathy.
Yes. Oh yeah, narcissism is
Narcissism
quite gentle, by
Standard thing.
comparison.
And the new scientist in July 2016
Yeah.
had a cover story. New Scientist is, for you to understand, the #2 most important science magazine.
Yeah.
They had a cover story in July 2016. You have to believe me, go and check. And the cover story said, "Parents, educate your children to be narcissists." So it's bon ton. Finally, I'm in fashion. So, but I think the more ubiquitous narcissism and psychopathy are, the more hopeless. Because, why? Because I just explained that narcissists cannot build a bridge.
Right.
Because there's no one there.
Yeah.
Narcissists have only internal objects. They can never build a bridge to an external object. So by definition, they can't have love, marriage, relationship. Forget all this. Psychopaths cannot build a bridge because they don't have an internal object. I mean, they don't build a bridge they attack with nuclear weapons, take your money, or things, power, or whatever. So there's no possibility of a bridge without two, how do you call these things that a bridge is standing on? I forgot.
Fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot that.
What do you call them?
Pillars.
Pillars of Luca.
We needed a French to tell us. So,
Les pillars.
le pillar. You cannot build a bridge without the pillar. And you need two pillars. One pillar is not enough. So, and narcissist like one pillar, and psychopath lacks another pillar.
Right.
A narcissistic psychopath lacks all pillars. And the bridge falls on his head. And he's in Liverpool.
I was the reason why it came up, and it relates to what you've just said directly in a kind of an eerie way, is I was thinking, we discussed yesterday a little bit about me as regards to relationships, my current view of relationships and where I'm up to. And I'm 41, so people say, "Are you married?" And I go, "No." And they look at me like I'm mad. And there's this sort of assumption that you should be married. And I get it, because I also would wonder, if a man is 41, why is he fucking not married? Everybody else is. I'd have the same thought. And I was like, okay, have a little think about that. As an investment in the modern culture, I would feel that this would not be a wise investment. With my business head on, you are asking me to get married. Okay, so I give 100% of what I have. What can I reasonably expect the other person to offer me? In the modern climate, for me to expect them to also offer 100% would be very stupid, because there's no evidence for that. If I look at other people in that age range, of that same background, whatever, I look at their behavior, I'm not going to get 100%. But you're asking me to invest 100 in a partnership, and the other person will give you maybe 60%. Somebody else comes along.
Like you.
Yeah, 60 is great. 60 is great. I mean, and the stats bear this out. That's why they fail. And we have apps and websites just dedicated to cheating, just dedicated to helping people cheat. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry now. And I think, well, we should invert this. It's actually, the question should be, why do you marry? Because it's a poor, and I'm not talking financial, I'm not being a psychopath here. Emotionally, it's a poor investment. So the notion of the bridge and the investment, then it follows over quite well. What's the proportionate investment I can expect? And it led me back to what we were talking about last night in my mind with God, in the sense of a universal sense of morality. Once we've abandoned a universal sense of morality is this old fuddy-duddy word, we can't. What's the fucking point of marriage? Morality is, Kardashians, great. Morality, horseshit. Get married. These two. Do you see where I'm rambling here?
Yeah. There is first of all, there's a serious risk that you're rationalizing.
Yes. As a defense mechanism to avoid intimacy.
Well, not only to avoid intimacy, but there is an indicated sense of failure. And like you feel that you failed and you're trying to...
Yeah.
That's rational. I didn't say you are. I said there's a risk that you are.
Yeah.
But let's look at it rationally. What is the solution? Not to get married or to redefine marriage? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are two ways about it.
Yeah.
Or you don't get married, or you redefine marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot of experimentation with new forms of marriage. You have open marriage, you have whatever suits, whatever goes with it. There's remote marriages. Well, I'm serious. Where the two members.
What's a remote marriage?
Remote marriage is two members of a couple live in different countries.
Wow.
And they meet like once every 6 months. There are proximity marriages where both members maintain their separate apartments, separate lives, and so on. There is don't ask, don't tell. I mean, there are numerous solutions being developed. Polyamory. So there are numerous solutions being developed precisely because of what you have said. I think we are, oh, to be honest, you are, confusing monogamy with marriage.
Okay.
And I even think further that you're confusing sexual exclusivity with monogamy. These are 3 tiers.
I was raised Christian. I mean, I can't get away from that.
No one is perfect, Richard. No one is perfect. I will always welcome you to the Jewish folk. Ein Volk, ein Richard, ein... So, and this confusion is not a criticism, because even very serious texts about marriage make this because these are three utterly distinct things.
Okay.
Sexual exclusivity is one thing, monogamy is another, and marriage is a third. Sexual exclusivity was originally invented in order to establish a regulated, orderly way to transmit property and wealth, both across members of a clan and across generations, from one generation to the next. There was a need for social exclusivity to be sure that the genetic pool is not invaded or contaminated by outsiders. So sexual exclusivity is intimately connected to property, wealth, and in many ways the capitalist system. It is not a mistake, it's not an accident that sexual, and I don't know how many people know that sexual exclusivity is only 500 years old.
Really?
Really. In the Middle Ages, for example, sexual exclusivity was the reserve of the higher classes. So knights, aristocrats, feudal lords, the kings, they insisted on sexual. Why? Because they had property, because they had titles, because he was a king. He needed to know that his heir,
And there's a genetic issue, yeah, the heir.
sanguine,
Yeah.
sanguinity, consanguinity. He needed to be sure that, so wherever there was a need to be certain of the provenance and origin of your children and the correct transmission of seed, of sperm, and so on, there sexual exclusivity appeared.
Okay.
But everyone else never heard of sexual exclusivity. I mean, and it's a new invention. And it is not an accident that sexual exclusivity co-appeared with the emergence of capitalism in the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries in Europe. Not an accident. Capitalism first began to emerge in the Baltic states and so on, emigrated down to the Netherlands and to Germany, and so this is where sexual exclusivity began to appear. Polygamy was, until very recently, pretty common. In the Muslim world until 200, 300 years ago. And monogamy was imported by the colonial forces, I mean, colonial conquerors.
Right.
So sexual exclusivity is new.
Okay.
So you can say, but it's not true. Because if you're not sexually exclusive, you're jealous. Jealousy is an interesting thing. Jealousy is a fear of loss. Why are you afraid to lose? Because of sexual exclusivity. If you don't have sexual exclusivity, you will not be afraid to lose your mate. I mean, if she can fuck anyone she wants, I mean, why would she leave you? I mean, you're afraid because if she is adulterous, if she does have an affair, social mores will force you to dismantle the relation. Adultery equals loss.
Yes.
Adultery equals loss. Loss equals jealousy. Loss leads to jealousy. I am afraid to lose my partner if she is not sexually exclusive because I will have to lose her, because society says so, because this, because that. So I will be very jealous, because I will be afraid to lose her. But the irony is that fear of losing, which leads to jealousy, is an outcome of sexual exclusivity, not the result
Not the other
of
way
sexual.
around, yeah.
So this is the first thing. Second thing is monogamy. Monogamy is a much longer provenance. Monogamy is a much longer provenance. And it is the union of one man and one woman. So it is, as I said, much longer history. But most of this history had to do with financial, economic arrangements. I mean, you needed a wife because you had to go to the field and plow the, It was a arrangement of convenience. Notions like childhood, romantic love, they're very new. Again, romantic love existed in the higher castes, in the higher orders. So you had romantic love, for example, among aristocrats in Persia. You had love poems from the 13th century, 1st century, and so on. But never among the...
Well, you need time for romantic love, and if you're fighting a daily battle for survival, it would seem a little bit twee to be worried about romantic love.
So if you go to 17th, 18th, and 19th century Victorian, England, and you read, for example, Jane Austen, I mean, Jane Austen makes very clear. You can fall in love with someone, but you would never marry him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so you have these total in our minds, in our view, totally artificial conflicts. Like the heroine is torn between the love of her life
Handsome
and
Mr.
Darcy, who has 200 hectares and 600 sheep.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course the sheep will win. I mean, she will marry Darcy because he has property, wealth, money. So it was a marriage. Monogamy was founded on convenience, economic considerations, increasing wealth, adjoining lots, agriculture, and so on and so on. So monogamy ran its course, simply ran its course. We are living in a postmodern, post-technological society. Because I don't know if people realize technological innovation has died long ago. I don't know if they realize. It's an interesting subject in itself. We think we are constantly innovating. It's utterly untrue.
I need to get into this.
Utterly
with you,
untrue.
but we won't do it now.
We won't do it now, but we live in a post-technological, postmodern age where monogamy is actually severely counterproductive. And so I think it will not survive. It's not surviving. I mean, first, to start with, 56% of men and women cheat.
Yeah.
So it's, by definition, not surviving.
I actually don't need the sexual exclusivity. That for me is not the thing. It's balance and it's fairness.
Right. We'll come to marriage. So you're talking about marriage, but you're conflating it. You have conflated it in your presentation with sexual exclusivity, with monogamy. Monogamy was a highly time-specific historical arrangement, which used to be a brilliant invention. Right now, it's counterproductive. In a postmodernist, post-technological society, it's counterproductive because, for example, it leads to misallocation of economic resources. It leads to restrictions on communication and exchange of information and so on. So it's bad for business, it's bad emotionally. So I don't think within 50 years we'll have any form of monogamy whatsoever. However, what you're talking about is marriage. What is marriage, again? Marriage was the contract that codified social mores, social conventions, and social practices. So you can have a marriage contract codifying monogamy. You can have a marriage contract codifying polygamy, like among the Mormons. You can have a marriage contract codifying open marriage. The marriage contract is open-ended. It codifies the intentions of the partners. But why do we get married at all? Never mind now the content of the marriage. Essentially for companionship. I think that's the core. Ultimately, it's the core. I mean, it starts with lust, with this, with that. Ultimately, it comes to companionship. So there, I think, highly specific case, things you said, I think you commit a bit of a narcissistic sin where you tend to idealize the institution. I mean, I'm giving 100%, I'm getting 60%. Why would you give 100%? It's setting up your partner for failure. Giving 100% is making sure your partner fails. It's testing your partner to the breaking point.
So don't give 100%.
No, never give 100%. It's inhuman. It's narcissistic because narcissist says, I'm 100%. I'm 100% omnipotent, 100% omniscient, I'm 100% perfect. It's true in my case, but, but coming to your partner and saying, listen, I'm giving 100%, you gave 60%, is setting her up for failure.
Right.
It's not human, and marriage is a human institution. By the way, much more human than monogamy. Monogamy is equally, what is monogamy? I'm giving you 100% of myself, and only to you. What is sexual exclusivity? I'm giving you 100% of my genitals, and only to you. These are setting your partner up for failure. Because your partner may want to fuck other people from time to time. And fuck it, we're all human. Or your partner may wish to make concurrent and parallel arrangements, not only with you, but with others, like polyamory. Anything 100 is not human. It's God. That's God. Render to God and to Vaknin. That is, which is to God and to Vaknin, and all the rest of you can share the rest. So I think if you redefine your expectations from marriage and realize that it's about companionship, live and let live, give as much as you can at any given point, sometimes 60, sometimes 40, sometimes 90. Good. I mean, if you become less idealistic, the problem, as you have described, I think the underlying problem is idealism. Okay. You have a very unrealistic view of the whole process. I mean, if you don't mind, because you made it personal. Yeah, yeah. And of course, my pleasure to publicly berate you and so on. And I hope this is the same camera like the previous stream, which makes me twice as big as you. So, no, but seriously, because, you know, I do regard...
I don't want to sound like one of these guys that you find online who's constantly complaining about the lot of men, but I would say that that's how I was trained. I was trained to be this good little soldier who offers 100%. That's what a good man does. I didn't... it's not from nothing. I mean, maybe it's a British thing, I don't know. But that's how I was brought up. That's what we're supposed to do.
It's counterproductive.
Totally.
I mean, in romantic relationships.
Absolutely, yeah.
A romantic relationship must be founded on utterly realistic expectations. Understanding that continuity cannot be guaranteed. I'm not talking about breaking up, but like sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Tolerance of the diapason, tolerance of the spectrum. And not setting up your partner for failure. I mean, making unrealistic, idealistic, total demands is making sure that it will fail.
And is what we've done with God.
And that's what we've done with God. Now, the thing is that when you're like that, you would tend to, your partner choice, your intimate partner choice would be severely affected. Because you would tend to select partners to whom you can give 100%. If you are invested emotionally very strongly in giving 100%, you would look for defective partners. Partners to whom you can give 100% or even 110%. You know, you would tend to look for deficient, lacking, defective, problematic, disordered, mentally ill, or otherwise ill.
Do you know all my ex-girlfriends?
Yes. I don't want to tell you what I did with most of them. So you would tend to choose them. Because listen, if you choose a partner who is balanced, has her own life, totally happy, I mean, she doesn't need your 100%. She does not need your 100%. Thank you very much.
So my core, the core approach is neurotic.
You're looking to be needed. You're looking to be needed. You are looking to give 100%. But to whom can you give 100%? To someone with zero. The totality of the couple is 100%. The totality, both members, the dyad is 100%. 50-50 is a great combination. So, but if you insist on giving the 100, you must find the zero.
This is potentially what you're saying would be revolutionary and a solution for a lot of the issues guys are facing. I've spoken to a lot of British guys who feel the same way, and American guys, definitely. I think it's more religious in America generally, and possibly this is something throwback to a Christian idealization of marriage. But what you're suggesting, if they can hear it, and I'm not sure that they will, because people often mishear what you're saying, I think would be a revolutionary idea. We're setting up for failure.
I can put it very simply. In a marriage, there's only 100%, never 200. Now you can divide it either way. I mean, it can be 50-50, which is a healthy marriage. But you can also be 100-0. Then you would choose someone who has zero to offer because she's mentally sick, she's needy, she's codependent, she's borderline, she's histrionic, she cheats on you, she tortures you. I mean, you would choose someone who is a zero so that you can be 100. That's why I said it's a bit narcissistic. So that you can gratify this sense of I am giving 100. Because listen, nothing personal. But giving 100 is being 100. Giving is being. Only he who is 100% can give 100%. I mean, if I feel that I'm 30, I would never think that I can give 100. I think if I make a huge effort, I can give 40. You know. But to give 100, I must be 100. I must be in many respects, a bit godlike, you know, to give 100. But what I'm saying is even deeper than that. You're setting up your partner for failure in the sense that if by some total accident you chose 50, a 50 partner, well balanced, healthy, with her own life, etc., you would not allow her to give you the 50. You would suppress this 50 by making the proposition of, I am giving 100. First of all, you set her up for failure. She can never reciprocate. She can never give you 50. But you would also actively push her to be 0. You will push her from 50 to 0.
Yeah.
Because you need to be 100, period. And whenever you're not 100, you feel ego dystonic, you feel guilty, you feel failure, you're failure, you feel defeated, you feel bad. When you're not 100, you feel bad. So what you're doing, you're emotionally blackmailing your partner. You're telling, listen, I need to feel 100. Can you be 0? The partner says, well, no, I'm not 0. I have my life. No, please be. Please, can you be disordered? Can you tax me? Can you tax me? Yeah. Can you take from me?
Yeah.
I need to give. Can you take from me? And this is where, wow, it's very cold here. This is where people make the mistake of confusing altruism with actually narcissistic defenses or narcissistic neediness.
Yeah.
Insisting to give 100 is the exact opposite of altruism.
Okay.
Exact opposite of altruism. It's more about narcissistic gratification than about altruism. Altruism is never, listen, become 100% dependent on me because I will provide you with 100%. That's narcissistic defense. Yeah. Altruism is, I know you have 50, let me help you get to 60. Or, I know you have a potential to become 50, can I help you in any way to become 50?
Yeah.
It's never about giving. It's about making the other grow and develop. To realize, as in the terms of Abraham Maslow, to self-actualize. But how can your partner self-actualize if she's getting everything from you? If you're providing 100, why would she self-actualize? It's a disincentive to self-actualize. Even more so, if she loves you, she will let go. She will give up. Because to self-actualize is to injure you, to wound you, to narcissistically injure you. So she will gradually, we call this process constriction. She will constrict herself. She will begin to close down. She will cut off. She will stop studying. She will cut off friends. She will cut off family. Because she will, unconsciously or intuitively, she will feel that the more she is dependent on you, the more she allows you to give, the happier you are. And she loves you. She wants you to be happy. So she will sacrifice herself. She will say, okay, I'll stop existing. Because when I'm in that state of 0, he's the happiest. So I become 0. And that's precisely the dynamic of codependence.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that.
No, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to express myself.